I'm happy to welcome viewers to another postmortem. A lot of people have been visiting these little discussions after our plays because they may be as curious as I am about the process of writing and performing and narrating and sound effectsing these podcasts. So today we have the two players in the podcast you just saw called "Have a Nice Transaction." The genesis of the play is very simple. I was reading one of these Reader's Digest type quotes that somebody overheard at a bank, where a vagrant opening the door for somebody had said, "Have a nice transaction," and they gave him a big tip because they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. So I just tucked that away in my little brain, and when the time came to write one of those "What would happen if" plays, and actually "What would happen if" is probably the essence of theater, right? I mean, anyway, that's when I pulled that line out, and the irony is pretty obvious. Have either of you ever been mugged?
No.
No?
I was almost shot.
No way.
I was thinking about what questions we were going to talk about with the story, and I'm like, first of all, trying to go to any ATM in the middle of the night just gives me the heebie-jeebies, so I would never do it, But I was passing through Mobile, Alabama, and I was with some friends, and we were traveling to New Orleans. And, a little pit stop before we have to drive the next, 2.5 hours to get into New Orleans. And I was FaceTiming with, I think it was my sister or my parents. I don't know, hey, we're in Mobile, whatever. And this guy's walking around, and then he looks at me, picks up a rock, and flings it my way. And I'm like, weird. Okay, cool. I brushed it off like nothing. I wanted to yell hey, what are you doing? So anyway, get back in the car, and I'm with my friend. And he goes, what was that about? And I'm like, the guy just threw a rock at me. And he goes, well, I'm going to honk at him as we're leaving, hey, what are you doing? So he honks at him, to which point the guy lifts his shirt, and there's a Glock sitting in his belt. And so we took off like a cannon. But man, and my heart was like, oh, if I had said anything, I would be dead. All because I didn't want a rock to hit me.
Oh my God.
So yeah, that was my only experience ever coming in contact with, a God complex. So
a client I represented as a literary agent, he wrote Western novels, and he was afraid. He lived in Connecticut. He was afraid to come to New York, but when he did, he wore a foot-long Bowie knife strapped to his hip, and he would walk down Fifth Avenue, where I used to live, around 102nd Street. He would walk down Fifth Avenue with this glistening knife prominently displayed. And he wore buckskins and a cowboy hat and this knife, and nobody ever bothered him. So I wanted to talk to you or ask you a little bit more about the process. So I write a script, which I think is the greatest thing in history, and I email the script to you. And what is your process in terms of converting it into performance? In terms of reading it aloud, do you read it to somebody? Do you get cued by a partner or companion? How does it work? I'm just curious to know how that works.
I mean, I think with me, oftentimes I think it's repeating a line until it feels right. So each line that comes up is I'll repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, and then after a while it starts to take shapes, little nuances. I start to consider the environment where Constantine's character in this case might be laying down or sitting down on the floor, something like that, where it gives me more of a just a feel of how these lines should be said, what kind of pauses that, what am I doing? I'm, with, the keypad and entering my credit card information, things like that. So oftentimes I end up repeating each line over and over until I get it. And then I go down to the next one.
Constantine,
I echo a similar sentiment with that. Especially with when I have to do heavy memorization, it's always brute repetition and just knocking the line after line, and the same thing, finding the nuances within it, and you'll find discoveries once you start working with a scene partner. In this case, when Steve and I had a chance to, this was again one of those on FaceTime,
right?
Through GarageBand or whatever it was, trying to send stuff off, where even through having done it by yourself, once you have the other player and once they've discovered their nuances, you start to pick up on that. And so it's oh, they're painting the picture really well. Let me try to give a solid reaction to what they're doing, because then it just makes it flow better. Because if I'm thinking about one thing, he's thinking about another, it'll never sync up. So, yeah.
Yeah, and on the editing side of things, when things are not when two people are not on FaceTime or something, as an editor, you'll find that even if two people say a line, they'll say two lines that are completely different as to how they might say them if they were interacting in person, but that's when the editing and the pacing becomes there's a big difference between the two lines being right on top of each other and being a quarter of a second spaced out.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a code among actors that you don't tell me how to do a line and I don't tell you how to do a line? Or do you have a relationship? Are you close enough to be able to say, how about trying it this way, or that doesn't sound right, or is that kind of what is the word, impolite, just not done?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a director, so it's really for you. You two are directing yourselves and directing each other. So is there some kind of a protocol for, hey, don't do that?
I think in this case, it just came down to just doing it a couple of times.
Right.
I might have, I might think that I might have heard Constantine say it one way and say vice versa, but at the end of the day, those adjustments are they kind of organically happen as you do them the next time. You kind of make mental notes as, oh, he said it this way the last time, so maybe I should just bend a little bit here, and I don't know. What do you think, Constantine?
It's a funny question, because I definitely have a mindset where it's hey, can I help tweak that? But against all judgment, I'm no, just let it be, because exactly what Steve said, organically it'll fix itself. So if I were to say something, they may have already known I was going to fix that, at which point you start to create that friction between the two actors of well, I was going to do that, but you're jumping on me, give me a chance.
Right,
and so it could lead to butting heads. So the tendency, absolutely not. I don't believe, unless the other actor, it's friends, and it's hey, can you try this? Can we try this? And it's just a mutual thing. Cool. And you definitely have to ask that at the forefront. Otherwise, it could cause problems down the line.
Yeah, right. Really weird, really quick.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, in a way, I won't say the more interesting, but the very interesting role was Steve's, who in this case is playing a straight man, and in several other plays you've done in this series, I've said to you, play it straight. How do you feel about? Do you feel like you're being typecast as a straight guy? In this case, let me just say, in this case, the role of Stewart is he's deliberately insincere, he's impatient, he's nervous, kind of revolted by this repulsive, smelly vagrant, and you played it perfectly, perfectly.
Well, it's a very real role. I mean, I can't, regrettably, I've felt that way probably for no real good reason. I mean, somebody could be next to you in a bank, and you just might be nervous because I was raised to be very aware of my surroundings, and I was told at a very young age, like, keep an eye on yourself and watch out for people. And if someone looks a certain way, then you don't know what they're going to do. So there's a lot of that played into that. And so no, I mean, Constantine is the one with all the interesting voices lately. So I'm not offended by
right now I'm 2-0 old Jewish man. So so I mean, and this is fun. This is the third older voice I've had to do actually for the series, so definitely a lot of fun.
Both done them well. I don't know anything about acting techniques or acting teaching, but do they ever teach you to not switch roles? Now, suppose in this particular play, you had each been given the other person's role. Would you have played it differently?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's just not. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
It's because if you switch the roles, Steve has already done a character that has to kind of ooze that charismatic from I think it's You Have a Guest, that charismatic devil's advocate, character. And I think in one of the earlier ones, playing straight, yeah. And I think that's trying to think, Too Hot to Handle. I know the voice is funny, but I felt could be.
Oh, is it hot in here?
Is it hot in here?
Yeah.
Too Hot to Handle. What am I talking about?
That's coming up in a couple of weeks.
I know. What a segue. I'm sorry. Was that a spoiler?
No. You have that gritty, gravelly voice down for the older characters. It's cool.
Yeah, it's
cool.
So how do you get into a voice? Are you musical? Were you a born mimic, or do you practice it? I mean,
that's a funnier story. So the first time I was doing voiceovers, podcasts, and stuff, I was told a lot that I wasn't doing it right. And so I set out on a mission, because I've never been one to be super solid on a particular accent or voice. I like to make characters, and it's a little boy voice, but it's not really that's not like a true impersonation of anything, And if I start talking in an accent, where am I from? So there's nothing ever simple. So it's really just trial and error, and just trying a bunch of things and hoping that one just really sticks to the wall. Because then I know I have a problem with, say, consistency, going throughout, and I really have to maintain this voice throughout maybe it gets a little higher, then I have to go back and try to do it again. So it's really a conquest to go and try to make sure that I can try to hammer these out, so no one can tell me you did it wrong. And it's really fun to just be creative with different voices. I like to live in that space rather than impersonations.
Well, I think you both did a superb job in your roles, and thank you. And I'm looking forward to. I think we have some new plays coming up in the next couple of weeks, in which one or the other of you will make a stellar appearance. And thanks again.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on The Creepery next week.
Sweet.
Sounds good. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Richard.
Coming up on the next episode, a chance encounter of two neighbors disposing of their garbage produces the sickening odor of danger.
In my imagination, I am opening the chute just a crack. A gust of foul air belches out of it. An icy chill descends on the room. I open the door a little wider and peer in. I hear a scuttling sound as if something is moving inside. I close the door and laugh at myself. Sarah, this is crazy. So, I pick up my bag of garbage and open the door wide. I insert it into the chute, and then something seizes my wrist. An agonizing pain shoots through my arms as razor-sharp claws puncture my flesh. Whatever is in there begins pulling me irresistibly into the chute. My head, my torso, my legs.
Jesus.
Whatever this thing is spinning me around and around, wrapping me in slimy cords, pinning my arms to my body. And then I see it. This monstrous, unspeakable, depraved thing, hideously deformed with yellow eyes and rotted brown teeth. I smell its putrid, nauseating breath.
God.
I'm helpless, jammed inside the walls of the chute like an insect trapped in a spider's web. And then
You're trembling.
it starts to eat me, starting with my toes and working its way up my ankles and knees and thighs and torso. It feeds on me for weeks, months. The agony is indescribable. I beg for it to kill me, but now will you let me out of here?
Trash talk.